My twins' college fund was excessive, while I quietly funded 3 cousins through school. You're spoiling them, my uncle said. I was also spoiling him, with generosity he didn't appreciate. Hey Reddit, buckle up, because this story is about family entitlement, secret generosity, and what happens when the person you've been bankrolling decides to bite the hand that feeds them. This mess has been building for years, but it all exploded 3 weeks ago at what was supposed to be a nice family dinner. I, 42 male, make good money, around $280,000 base, plus stock options that pushed my total comp over $400,000 last year. I've been in tech for 20 years, worked my ass off, and built a comfortable life for my family. My wife Sarah and I have 16-year-old twins, Emma and Josh. They're good kids, not perfect, but who is at that age? Emma wants to study environmental science. Josh is into computer engineering. They work hard in school, play sports, have part-time jobs. Normal teenagers doing normal teenager things. Here's what matters for this story. I started college funds for the twins the day they were born. Been contributing steadily for 16 years, plus the market's been decent. Those funds are sitting at around $185,000 each right now. Not enough to cover 4 years at an Ivy League school, but enough that my kids won't graduate drowning in debt like I did. I graduated with $87,000 in student loans. Took me until I was 34 to pay them off. I remember the sick feeling every time I made that monthly payment, watching interest pile up, knowing I was basically paying for an education I'd already received. I swore my kids would never deal with that. The loans affected everything. Couldn't buy a house until my early 30s because my debt-to-income ratio was trash. Couldn't take the startup job that could have made me rich because I needed stable income for loan payments. Couldn't save for retirement properly until my mid-30s. Every financial decision for over a decade was constrained by those damn loans. I remember sitting at my kitchen table at 28, looking at my loan balance, still over $60,000 after 4 years of payments, and just wanting to cry. My college roommate, whose parents paid his way, was already buying investment properties. Meanwhile, I was celebrating paying off my smallest loan, which still left me with 5 more to go. The other key player in this disaster is my older brother's family. My brother David, 45M, married young to his high school sweetheart Michelle. They had 3 kids, Tyler, 23M, Madison, 21F, and Blake, 19M. David works in sales, Michelle's a dental hygienist. They do okay, but 3 kids in college basically back-to-back? That's brutal for anyone. Growing up, David and I were close. He was the athletic one. I was the nerdy computer kid. Classic dynamic. He looked out for me in high school when bigger kids gave me shit, and I helped him barely pass algebra so he could stay on the football team. We had each other's backs. When we were kids, our family didn't have much money. Dad worked construction, Mom was a secretary. We weren't poor, but we definitely weren't comfortable. I remember wearing David's hand-me-downs until they were literally falling apart. Christmas meant one nice gift and a few small things. Vacations were camping trips because we couldn't afford anything else. One year, I wanted to go on the 8th grade class trip to Washington, D.C., cost $400. Might as well have been $4 million in our house. Dad sat me down and explained, very gently, that we just didn't have it. I could see the shame in his eyes, that he couldn't give his kid this basic experience. I told him it was fine, that I didn't really want to go anyway. We both knew I was lying. That background made David and me both determined to do better for our kids. But we took different paths. I went into tech, worked insane hours in my 20s and 30s, saved aggressively. David chose family time over career advancement, which I respect. Different priorities, you know? David's always been the better person, honestly. While I was pulling all-nighters to meet deadlines and climbing the corporate ladder, he was coaching his kids' soccer teams and never missing a school play. His kids grew up with a present father. Mine got a dad who was frequently distracted by work emails and conference calls. But the trade-off was financial. My aggressive career focus meant more money. His work-life balance meant less. Neither choice is wrong, but they come with different consequences. 8 years ago, Tyler was applying to colleges. One night, David called me, voice rough like he'd been crying. "Mark, I don't know what to do," he said. Tyler got into State University. It's a great school, but even with financial aid, we're looking at $15,000 a year out of pocket. We don't have it. We've got nothing saved. I failed my kid. Hearing my big brother, the guy who'd always seemed invincible, break down like that gutted me. "What about loans?" I asked. "He'd graduate with $60,000 in debt. I can't do that to him. I can't let him start his adult life buried like that." I thought about my own student loans, the weight of them, The opportunities I'd missed because I was chained to those payments. What if I helped? I said. Silence. Then, Mark, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Let me cover his tuition and room and board. Consider it an investment in my nephew's future. That's $15,000 a year for 4 years. That's $60,000. I'm aware of the math, Dave. I can handle it. But there's one condition. Nobody knows. Not Tyler, not mom and dad. Nobody. As far as anyone's concerned, you guys found the money somewhere. A scholarship. Whatever story you want to tell. But this stays between us. Why the secrecy? Because I don't want Tyler feeling weird around me. I don't want Christmas dinners where everyone's thanking me. I just want to help my nephew go to college without the burden I had. That's it. He tried to argue, said it was too much that he couldn't accept. I told him about the startup job I'd turned down because of my loans, how that company went public 3 years later, and early employees became millionaires. I told him about the house I couldn't buy until I was 32, missing out on a decade of equity building. I told him about the stress, the shame, the feeling of being trapped by decisions I'd made as an 18-year-old kid who didn't understand the real cost of borrowing. Don't let Tyler live that, I said. I've got the money. Let me help. He agreed. We set it up so the money went into a 529 account in David's name. He paid the bills, and nobody was the wiser. Tyler thought his parents had somehow scraped together the funds and maybe took out some loans themselves. The system was simple. Every quarter, I'd transfer $3,750 into the 529. David would pay the semester bills. Tyler focused on his studies. The beauty of it was the anonymity. I wasn't the rich uncle swooping in to save the day, just a guy quietly helping his brother take care of his kid. Tyler thrived at State, made good grades, joined a fraternity, got internships that led to his current marketing job, graduated debt-free and landed on his feet immediately. Watching him walk across that stage, knowing I'd helped make that possible without the weight of debt crushing him, that felt good. Real good. 2 years later, Madison was heading to college. Same situation, same conversation with David. By this point, I'd gotten a promotion and a big raise. I told him I'd cover Madison too. Mark, this is too much, he protested. You already did so much for Tyler. She's my niece. Same rules, nobody knows, and she gets to start her career without debt. That's the goal. Madison's studying to be a teacher. Teachers start at maybe $40,000 in our state. If she'd graduated with $60,000 in loans, the math just wouldn't work. She'd have spent her entire 20s broke, possibly forced into a different career just to afford her loan payments. Instead, she's doing her student teaching now, loving every minute, and will actually be able to afford to pursue her passion. Then came Blake. He's the youngest, just finished his freshman year at State. Smart kid, wants to be a physical therapist. DPT programs are expensive. We're talking another 3 years of graduate school after his bachelor's. If he'd been carrying undergraduate debt, graduate school would have been financially impossible. Same deal. I'm covering his education through his 529. So over the past 8 years, I've quietly funded 3 college educations. Roughly $180,000 total so far, with Blake having 3 more years to go. Added up, I'm looking at around $225,000. By the time Blake graduates, here's the thing. David and Michelle know I'm doing this. Tyler, Madison, and Blake, they have no idea. They think their parents are working extra jobs, refinancing the house, whatever story David and Michelle told them to explain how they're affording college. This whole time, I never mentioned it to anyone outside David and Sarah. Didn't tell my parents. Didn't tell our younger sister Amy. It wasn't about recognition. It was about helping family without making it weird. For 8 years, this arrangement worked perfectly. I'd transfer the money quarterly. David's kids got educated. Everyone was happy. I never regretted a single payment. Watching my niece and nephews build their futures without drowning in debt made every dollar worth it. The money came from my annual bonuses mostly. Tech companies pay well, and I'd gotten into the habit of taking my bonus each year and splitting it between my kids' 529s and helping David. Some years it meant I couldn't buy the new car I wanted or take the exotic vacation Sarah had her eye on. But those sacrifices felt right. My brother needed help. I could provide it. End of story. Sarah supported it completely, by the way. She'd seen what my student loans did to me, understood why I wanted to help David's kids avoid that fate. She'd occasionally ask if we were overextending ourselves, but she never tried to stop me. If anything, she's more generous than I am. She's the one who suggested we start contributing to Madison's education before David even asked. Then 3 weeks ago, everything went nuclear. We had a big family dinner at my parents' house. Mom's birthday, so everyone was there. Parents, David and Michelle, Tyler and his new girlfriend Madison, Blake, my younger sister Amy with her husband and kids, plus me, Sarah, and the twins. The house was packed, loud, chaotic in that good family way. Mom had made her famous pot roast. Dad was grilling outside. Kids were running around the backyard. Normal Sunday dinner at my parents' place, the kind we'd been having my whole life. At some point during dinner, conversation turned to the twins' college plans. Emma was talking about visiting some schools next month, and Josh mentioned he'd been researching engineering programs. My mom, bless her heart, asked if we had money saved for their education. Before I could answer, Sarah said, "Oh yeah, Oscar set up funds for them when they were born. We've been contributing consistently. They're in good shape." "That's wonderful," Mom said. "David and Michelle, you should have done that for yours. Would have made things easier." I saw David shift uncomfortably. Michelle just smiled and said, "Well, we're managing. The kids are doing great." That's when my Uncle Rick decided to insert himself into the conversation. Uncle Rick is my dad's younger brother. He's 58, works in insurance sales, and has always been the type to have opinions about everyone else's money. He lives in a nice house, drives a new car every 3 years, takes fancy vacations. But he's also constantly complaining about taxes, calling people who get government assistance lazy, and generally being a judgmental prick about other people's financial choices. Rick's one of those guys who thinks his success is 100% earned and everyone else's struggles are 100% their fault. Never mind that he inherited his dad's insurance book of business, giving him an instant client base and steady income. Never mind that his wife's family money helped them buy their first house. In Rick's world, he's a self-made man, and everyone else just isn't working hard enough. I've never liked Rick much. He's the uncle who'd make comments about my computer games when I was learning to code, like it wasn't a real skill. The uncle who implied I was wasting my potential by going to state instead of a real university. The uncle who, when I got my first tech job, said I'd never make real money playing with computers. "How much are we talking?" Rick asked, looking at me. "Ballpark?" Sarah and I exchanged glances. "Enough," I said vaguely. "We've been putting money away for a while." "Ballpark," he repeated. 10 grand? 20? I really didn't want to get into specifics, but Rick's the type who won't drop something once he's latched onto it. About $185,000 for each of them. You could hear silverware stop moving. Everyone just stared. "Each?" Rick said. "You're telling me you've got $370,000 sitting in college funds?" "That's what 16 years of consistent investing does," I said, trying to downplay it. Rick leaned back in his chair, this smirk on his face that I've hated since I was a kid. "That's excessive, Oscar. That's way more than any kid needs for college. You're spoiling them." "I'm making sure they don't start their adult lives buried in debt," I replied calmly. "There's providing for your kids, and then there's spoiling them to the point where they don't understand the value of money. You're teaching them they can just coast through life because daddy's got everything handled." My twins were sitting right there hearing this. Emma looked mortified. Josh was staring at his plate like he wanted to disappear through it. "I'm teaching them," I said, voice harder now, "that education is valuable enough to invest in. I'm teaching them that if you work hard and plan ahead, you can help your kids avoid the mistakes you made." "Mistakes? You mean like actually having to work for something?" "I had loans. Your brother had loans. We turned out fine. Struggle builds character, and financial stress causes depression, anxiety, and forces people to make career decisions based on loan payments instead of passion. I had $87,000 in debt. Took me over a decade to pay it off. You know what that decade cost me? The ability to take risks, to pursue opportunities, to save for my own future. I'm not putting my kids through that if I can prevent it." Rick shook his head, clearly enjoying himself now. He had an audience, and he was warming up to his favorite topic, explaining why everyone else was wrong. "You're part of what's wrong with this generation. Everyone wants to bubble wrap their kids, protect them from every hardship. Life's hard, Oscar. Better they learn that now." I was about to respond when David, my brother, jumped in. "Rick, that's enough. Oscar's money. Oscar's kids. Oscar's decision." "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Rick said, looking around the table for support. A few people were nodding. My dad's side of the family, mostly, who'd grown up with Rick's bootstrap mentality. That kind of money for teenagers? It's ridiculous. Especially when other people in this family are struggling to make ends meet. The irony hit me like a physical blow. I looked at David, who'd gone pale. He gave me a tiny head shake. "Don't," his eyes said. "Don't tell." But I was done. 8 years of keeping this secret, 8 years of helping David's family, and here's Rick, who'd never helped anyone in his life beyond giving unwanted advice, lecturing me about spoiling my kids while I'd been quietly funding his nephew and niece's entire college careers. I felt Sarah's hand on my arm, a gentle warning. She knew what was coming. I looked at my twins, both uncomfortable, both probably wondering if their dad really was spoiling them. Then I looked at Tyler, Madison, and Blake, who had no idea they were sitting at this table debt-free because of me. The room had gone quiet. Everyone was waiting to see if I'd back down or escalate. Rick had that satisfied look on his face, like he'd won some kind of debate. "You think $370,000 for my twins is excessive?" I said quietly. "Damn right I do," Rick said confidently. "Interesting, because I've spent about $180,000 over the past 8 years, with another $45,000 or so to go. You think that's excessive too?" Rick looked confused. "What are you talking about?" I turned to David. "Sorry, brother. I can't keep this quiet anymore." David closed his eyes. Michelle grabbed his hand. I could see her mouthing, "It's okay" to him. "I've been paying for Tyler, Madison, and Blake's college educations," I said, looking directly at Rick. "Full tuition, room and board, books, everything. For 8 years. David and Michelle didn't magically come up with that money. I did. You could have heard a pin drop." Rick's face went through several colors, red to white to red again. "Tyler thinks his parents somehow scraped together the money," I continued. "Madison thinks they took out loans. Blake assumes the same. But the reality is, I've been quietly funding all 3 college educations because I didn't want my niece and nephews starting their lives in debt. I've spent $180,000 so far, and I'll spend another $45,000 before Blake graduates. So please, Rick, explain to me how $370,000 for my own kids is excessive, while $225,000 for my brother's kids is... What? Just good uncle behavior that doesn't count?" Tyler was staring at me, mouth open. Madison had tears running down her face. Blake looked like someone had slapped him. "You paid for our college?" Tyler said, voice barely above a whisper. "This whole time? Your parents and I agreed it would be better if you didn't know. We didn't want it to be weird, didn't want you feeling obligated or uncomfortable. We just wanted you to get educated without the burden of debt." Rick had recovered from his shock and now looked furious. His face was the color of a tomato. "That's completely different. David and Michelle are struggling. You're well off. You can afford it. And that makes my money free for the taking? Makes it okay for you to judge how I spend it on my own kids while I'm literally funding someone else's family? While I'm helping the same nephews and niece you see at every holiday dinner? You offered to do that," Rick sputtered. "David didn't demand it. You're absolutely right. I offered because I love my brother and my niece and nephews. But that doesn't give you, or anyone, the right to tell me I'm doing too much for my own children. You want to talk about excessive? I've got plenty of generosity to go around, Rick. But watching you lecture me about spoiling my kids while I'm dropping $225,000 on my brother's family behind the scenes? That shit ends now." My dad finally spoke up, clearly uncomfortable. "Oscar, maybe we should talk about this privately." "No, Dad. I'm done with private. 8 years I kept this secret because David asked me to. 8 years I wrote those checks quietly, never looking for recognition or gratitude. And that was fine. I didn't do it for credit. I did it because my brother needed help, and I was in a position to give it. But I'm not going to sit here and get lectured about financial responsibility by someone who's never contributed a damn dollar to anyone's education but his own kids." I looked at Rick. "You want to know what's excessive? It's excessive to judge other people's financial decisions when you have no idea what they're doing behind the scenes. It's excessive to lecture people about the value of struggle when you've never had to struggle yourself. You inherited your dad's insurance business, Rick. You started with clients and a reputation handed to you. Don't talk to me about building character through hardship when you've never experienced it." Rick stood up, face red, fists clenched. "You're out of line. No, you're out of line. You've been out of line for years with your opinions about everyone else's money. You judge people on assistance while you got a head start from your dad. You lecture about hard work while you inherited success. But this time, you decided to attack my parenting and my financial choices in front of my kids, not knowing I've been quietly supporting half this family for the better part of a decade. So yeah, I'm done being polite about it." I turned to my niece and nephews. "Tyler, Madison, Blake, I'm sorry you found out this way. Your parents didn't want me to tell you because they didn't want you feeling weird around me. They wanted you to just focus on school and building your futures. But the secret's out now, so here's the truth. I paid for your educations because I love you and because I had the money to do it. I don't regret a single payment. I'm proud of all three of you. But going forward, don't let anyone make you feel bad about getting help when you needed it. There's no shame in accepting support from family. Tyler was openly crying now. Madison had her face in her hands. Blake just looked stunned. I looked at David. I'm sorry, bro. I know you wanted to keep this quiet, but I couldn't sit there and let Rick trash me for taking care of my kids when I've been taking care of yours too. David just nodded slowly. He wasn't mad. I could see relief on his face, like a weight had been lifted. Michelle squeezed his hand. I stood up. Sarah, kids, we're leaving. My mom tried to stop us. Oscar, please, let's just calm down. I am calm, Mom, but I'm not staying somewhere where my parenting gets questioned by someone who has no idea what I've sacrificed to help this family. Emma and Josh were already standing, grabbing their jackets. Sarah collected her purse. We walked out in silence while the entire family watched. The drive home was quiet. The twins sat in the back seat, not touching their phones, just staring out the windows. Sarah kept her hand on mine as I drove. Finally, Emma said, Dad, did you really pay for Tyler, Madison, and Blake's college? Yeah, sweetie, I did. Why didn't you tell us? Because it wasn't about recognition. It was about helping them. You know how I always tell you that if you can help someone, you should? This was me practicing what I preach. That's a lot of money, Josh said quietly. It is. But your aunt and uncle needed help, and I was in a position to give it. That's what family does. But Uncle Rick said, Uncle Rick doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, I said. And I'm sorry you guys had to hear that. The money I've set aside for your college, that's yours. I've worked hard to make sure you have options when you graduate. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty about that. We don't feel guilty, Emma said. We feel proud. You helped Tyler and Madison and Blake, and you're helping us. That's amazing, Dad. Sarah squeezed my hand again. Your father's a good man, she said. Sometimes good people get taken advantage of, but that doesn't make them stupid. It just means they care. When we got home, the call started. First my mom asking me to apologize to Rick. Then Amy, my younger sister, calling to say I'd ruined the birthday dinner and made everyone uncomfortable. Then a text from David. Thanks for finally saying what needed to be said. Been carrying that weight for too long. That text made it worth it. 8 years of keeping that secret had been eating at David and Michelle, forcing them to lie to their kids, to accept help while pretending they hadn't. Now it was out, and while the circumstances weren't ideal, at least they didn't have to lie anymore. The next morning, Tyler called me. Uncle Oscar, can we talk? Of course, buddy. I can't believe you did that for me. For all of us. My whole time at school, I thought my parents were killing themselves working overtime to pay for it. I thought they'd taken out massive loans. I felt guilty every time I bought a coffee or went out with friends, thinking that money could have gone toward my tuition. Your parents did work hard. They're good parents who wanted the best for you. I just helped make that possible. But $60,000? That's insane. That's a house down payment. That's a car. It's an investment in your future. And look at you now. Good job, your own apartment. Starting your life without debt hanging over your head. You think I regret it? But I didn't even know. I never thanked you. That's because you weren't supposed to know. And you don't owe me thanks, Tyler. Watching you graduate, seeing you build your career, that's all the thanks I need. You did the work. You earned your degree. You built your resume. You landed your job. I just removed a financial obstacle that would have made all of that harder. He was quiet for a moment. I'm calling my parents after this. Gonna hug them both and thank them for everything they did. And then I'm going to figure out how to pay this forward someday. That's all I want. Use the opportunity you got, make something of yourself, and when you're in a position to help someone else, do it. That's how it works. Madison called later that day with similar sentiments. She'd been crying, overwhelmed by the revelation. I've been so stressed about money, she said. Teachers don't make much. And I kept thinking about how I'd pay back loans on a teacher's salary. I almost switched majors because I didn't think I could afford to be a teacher. But you didn't switch. No, because I thought my parents believed in me enough to take on that debt for me. Turns out it was you. It was all of us. Your parents wanted you to pursue your passion. I just made it financially possible. Blake texted me a long message about how he'd been stressing about money, wondering if he should drop out and work instead, and how knowing this had lifted a huge weight off his shoulders. He said he'd been looking at less expensive schools to transfer to, thinking he was burdening his parents. Now he could just focus on his studies. By the end of that first day, I'd talked to all three of them. All three were grateful, emotional, and determined to make the most of the opportunity I'd given them. That felt right. What didn't feel right was the continued fallout from the rest of the family. Rick sent me a text. You made a spectacle of yourself. Throwing money around doesn't make you better than everyone else. It makes you an arrogant prick who can't handle criticism. I didn't respond. What was the point? Rick wasn't going to suddenly develop self-awareness. My mom called again, this time with Dad on speaker. Oscar, you need to apologize to Rick. You embarrassed him in front of the whole family. He embarrassed me first, Mom, in front of my kids. He called me a bad parent, said I was spoiling my children, and did it loud enough for everyone to hear, including Emma and Josh. That's different. He didn't know. Exactly. He didn't know. He made assumptions and judgments without knowing the full picture. And that's on him, not me. If he'd kept his mouth shut about how I parent my kids, he never would have found out about David's situation. But family doesn't mean I have to take shit from people who think they know better. I've been quietly helping this family for 8 years. I never asked for recognition, never threw it in anyone's face, never made David or his kids feel bad about accepting help. But I'm also not going to sit silently while someone attacks my parenting and my financial choices, especially when they're completely ignorant of what I've been doing behind the scenes. Rick feels blindsided, Dad said. Good. Maybe next time he'll think twice before running his mouth about things he doesn't understand. Maybe he'll realize that people's financial situations are complex and he doesn't know everything just because he inherited a successful business. That's uncalled for, Dad said, defensive. Rick was his little brother, after all. Is it? He literally told me I was spoiling my kids with the money I'd saved for them, while I've spent the same amount helping his nephew and nieces. The hypocrisy is staggering, Dad. And the fact that you can't see that is part of the problem. We're asking you to be the bigger person, Mom said. I was the bigger person for 8 years. I was the bigger person when I wrote those quarterly checks without asking for recognition. I was the bigger person when I kept the secret, even though it meant David and Michelle had to lie to their kids. But being the bigger person doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean accepting criticism I don't deserve just to keep the peace. I hung up. Sarah looked at me. You okay? I'm tired, I admitted. Tired of being the one who helps everyone but gets criticized for it. Tired of keeping secrets to make other people comfortable. Tired of people like Rick thinking they get to have opinions about my life when they know nothing about what I actually do. You did the right thing, she said. Maybe not the polite thing, but the right thing. Over the next week, the family divided into camps. David and his family were firmly on my side, grateful the secret was out. Tyler had apparently called Rick and told him to back off, that I'd been more of a parent to him financially than Rick ever had been. Madison posted something on Facebook about being grateful for family who support each other without asking for recognition. Amy, my younger sister, thought I'd been too harsh but understood my frustration. She called and we had a long talk. Rick's always been like this, she said. Remember when I was struggling after my divorce and he told me I should have picked a better husband? Like that was helpful advice? Yeah, I remember. You wanted to punch him. Still do sometimes. But you know how it is. He's family, so we tolerate it. Until we don't. My parents were stuck in the middle trying to play peacemaker. Mom kept calling with variations of, can't we all just get along? Dad eventually stopped calling, probably realizing I wasn't backing down. And Rick? Rick was telling anyone who'd listen that I'd been showing off and throwing money around to make him look bad. He completely missed the point. I'd been doing this quietly for years specifically to avoid showing off. He was the one who forced it into the open by running his mouth. 2 weeks after the dinner, David called me. Want to grab a beer? We met at our usual spot, a sports bar halfway between our houses. He looked tired but lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. How's Michelle handling it? I asked. She's relieved, actually. We've been lying to the kids for years. It was exhausting. Every time one of them mentioned money stress, we had to pretend we were barely making it work, had to maintain this story about loans and overtime and sacrifices. Now we can be honest. It's like we can breathe again. How are they really doing? Tyler's doing great. He called me crying, thanking us for sacrificing so much for his education. I had to sit him down and tell him the truth, that Uncle Oscar sacrificed, we just accepted help. He gets it now. Keeps talking about how he wants to help his kids someday the way you helped him. That's good. Madison's student teaching in a low-income area keeps texting me about how grateful she is that she can afford to do this job she loves. A lot of her college friends went into corporate jobs because they needed the salary to pay off loans. She doesn't have that pressure. She gets to teach because she wants to, not because she has to do something more lucrative. And Blake? Blake's more focused on school, less worried about money. Says he can actually enjoy college now instead of stressing about costs constantly. He stopped looking at cheaper schools to transfer to. He's staying at State, which is where he wants to be. I'm glad. Mark, I need to say something. Thank you. Not just for the money, though that's huge, but for standing up to Rick. Guy's been judging everyone for years, and nobody's ever called him on it. You did what I should have done a long time ago. He pissed me off. Yeah, but you were right. He didn't know shit about what you've been doing, but he felt entitled to judge anyway. That's on him. The way he talked about Emma and Josh, like they were spoiled brats just because their dad planned ahead, that was out of line. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching sports highlights on the TVS. Then David said, Rick's been calling Dad, trying to get him to make you apologize. Not happening. Good. You don't owe him anything. If anything, he owes you an apology for talking about your kids that way. I'm not holding my breath. David laughed. Yeah, me neither. Rick apologizing would require him admitting he was wrong, and we both know that's never happened in recorded history. 3 weeks out from the dinner, things have settled into a new normal. The secret's out, my niece and nephews know the truth, and the family's adjusted to the new reality. Tyler got a good job in marketing, moved into his first apartment last week. He sent me a picture with the caption, "Thanks to you, I can actually afford furniture instead of sitting on milk crates like my friends." Madison's graduating in 2 months, already has a teaching position lined up at a school she loves in an underserved district. Blake's crushing his sophomore year, confident he can focus on his physical therapy prerequisites without financial anxiety. My twins? They're fine. Better than fine, actually. Emma and Josh weren't damaged by the dinner confrontation. If anything, it made them appreciate what they have. They both got part-time jobs this semester, not because they need the money for college, but because they wanted to contribute something themselves. Emma's working at a coffee shop, Josh is tutoring math. They're learning work ethic on their own terms, not because they're desperate for money. That's the kind of character I was hoping to build. Kids who work because they want to, because they value contributing, not because they're financially desperate. There's a difference between teaching work ethic through necessity and teaching it through values. I'm going with values. As for Rick, we haven't spoken since that night. My parents keep trying to facilitate some kind of reconciliation, but I'm not interested. He hasn't apologized, hasn't acknowledged he was out of line, hasn't done anything except play the victim to anyone who'll listen. Last week, Mom called and said Rick wanted to clear the air. I asked if that meant he was planning to apologize for attacking my parenting in front of my kids and making them feel guilty about their college funds. She said he felt I owed him an apology for embarrassing him. I told her we had nothing to discuss then. The truth is, I don't need Rick in my life. I don't need his approval or his opinions. I don't need him to understand why I make the financial choices I make. I spent $225,000 helping my brother's kids get educated. I'm spending $370,000 making sure my own kids have the same opportunities. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.